This is my last session for the day for the conference, and so I'm quite exhausted. I'm sure you all are tired of seeing me as well. No, I didn't mean to say that way. That sounds like I was tired of seeing you. That's not the point. This session is another panel discussion like we had yesterday afternoon, and I will be the referee. For those that were here yesterday, we will understand the point. Yeah, we'll see. I don't know. It'll be just as hard, I think. I'll be the one that gets hit, when you try to get in and stop it. Before we start, what I wanted to do is just frame the session like I've tried to do with all of these sessions, at least to what I'm hoping to get out of it. As I mentioned earlier in the last session, I'm an analyst, so I'm always asking questions, and I feel that that's my job to ask questions up here for me to learn as well. And if I'm asking the question, maybe you have the same interest. So the title for this session is What's Really Needed for Network and Endpoint Protection? And, whoops, too fast. There we go. And based on one person on the panel, who isn't even there now. Where did Leor go? Oh, okay. Yeah, see, that's right. But anyhow, I put in this slide because the point was, what do we mean by an endpoint? And what I want to focus the thing on are endpoints. These are devices that are commonly used within plants or SCADA systems and things like that. I mean, by endpoints, I mean PC-type devices, but also PLCs, R2Us, DCS systems, IEDs. It depends on what industry you're in. I also think people do consider things like laptops and things that are brought into a plant, though I don't want to dwell on that because that's kind of a different issue. How do you make sure they're secure? But anyhow, one might include it. What we're not talking about with endpoints are things like personal devices like smartphones and things like that. Though again, one could argue and say that is an issue and it's a threat, but I just don't want to get into that. It's a different topic. And then from the point of view of networks, the kind of networks that I want to talk about, or I hope we can focus on, are what we would all call industrial networks. And the kind of security devices, and that would be everything from a DMZ down to control levels and stuff like that. I don't know if we want to include I/O networks or not, but if somebody wants to go there, go ahead. And then what we're excluding are the networks outside the plant. Like if we talk about SCADA, I'm not talking about the public SCADA system. I'm talking about within the network, within the private networks and things like that. Is that enough, Leor? Did I define it? Okay. And just to frame this discussion, there's my little model again. I just used this. I think we've covered about everything in this model. And what we're focusing on this session is right there. And the last sessions we've had, the last couple, have been things where we talked about services, we talked about technology to help you manage things, we talked about managed things, we talked about anomaly and breach detection. Now, what I'm focusing on are the ones that are more the initial steps that people take, which is network security devices, which are firewalls of all different types, things that provide security in network. I probably shouldn't even use the word firewall because someone will complain about that, right? But that could be things like zone firewalls, next generation firewalls. It could be firewalls with deep packet inspection and other kinds of features specifically designed for ICS protocols. More than just a next generation firewall type of deep packet inspection. It could include unidirectional gateways or data diodes. That's a little inside joke, I'm sorry. So we're talking about those kind of network devices, and we're also talking about endpoint applications that are common. And many of these are things that are primarily used, I would say, in PC-based systems, though they could be maybe in embedded systems today. But this would include everything from anti-malware software to application whitelisting software, access control. Though we can discuss that if somebody wants to. But the key point is that I want to make is when you look at this, they're at a very low level in the sense of very basic things that people do. One reason I titled this, What's Really Needed for Endpoint Network and Endpoint Protection, is people have been using these for a long time. And I want to ask the panel, when we give the panel up here, about whether we still need to use that, whether they are using that. Things like application whitelisting, which was very popular a few years ago. Some have used it, some don't, and things like that. So I want to explore that and get the impressions from this panel as to what's really needed. And I have some premises, which that's what I just said in essence. When I say premises, I'm the one who created these sessions, what to define them to be. And one of the things I see, because I do market studies in cybersecurity, is that the markets for firewalls, network security solutions, and endpoint protection type technology is a big market, because there's lots of devices out there, lots of networks. But it's not the high growth markets. The high growth markets are things like anomaly detection and things like that. So it's not that you don't need them, but I think sometimes I wonder, are people just used to using that? And are we using it because we keep using it? Particularly probably the one with that best example is probably anti-malware. People say, well, you got to maintain the signatures, so do you really need to use that anymore? I know my opinion, and I know others will have theirs. And so this type of technology, whether they're firewalls, network security solutions, or endpoint protections, we've been using them for a long time. But the real fact of the matter, another fact or premise that I have, is we still get a lot of intrusions. So maybe they're not doing what is necessary to be done. Maybe, I was just kind of implying that maybe we're doing things we don't need to do. Well, likewise, there may be things that we need to do that we're not doing, okay? Because we're not really solving the whole problem, but maybe that's not the place to solve it. So I have a bunch of questions, and the kinds of issues, I don't want to list the questions we're going to talk about, that's up to you. But one thing I've talked about earlier, one issue I see with these kind of technologies is people don't maintain them. Application whitelisting is one I hear a lot about. Same thing with firewall profiles and things, where they just don't have time to maintain them. So you know that you aren't getting the protection you hoped you were getting. And is that the issue? Is that why some people, maybe someone would say they work, but they're not being maintained? Or is it just not adequate? Or another question is, have we reached the practical limit of what can be done with technology to keep attackers out? I hear lots of people saying that. I've heard frequently, and I'll be honest, I probably believe it myself. If someone's intent in getting into your system, they'll get into your system, doesn't matter what you do. Now maybe that's with spear phishing and other things, but so do we need all the devices we have if that's true? And again, do we need some other kind of solutions, some other technologies? Or do we just have to accept the fact that someone's going to get in your system and focus? One thing I see a lot today is people focusing more on the minimizing the impact kind of stuff. Find the intrusions quick and get it out as fast as possible to minimize the impact. Now, I just threw in here a couple slides from a survey I did a year and a half ago, I think. And I forget, it was 100 and 150 end users or something. It's an end user survey. But I was just asking about the use of some of these tools. And if you look, antivirus is the top line on that chart. And I think at the time it was like 90% of the people I interviewed say, yeah, we use that, which was no big surprise, to be honest, okay? I asked about host-based firewalls, because that was something that used to be popular. I don't see many people using that. A lot less use that, and it's kind of flat, no growth. Application whitelisting at that time was something that was low, but was growing. Everybody I would talk to says, oh yeah, I'm going to implement that. But to be frank, I would talk to others who had, and they says, no, I'm not going to use it anymore. So there's different views on that. Whoops. When it came to network security solutions, everybody seemed to be using next generation firewalls these days. Now, when I say that's for zone protection, for perimeter protection and stuff like that, I don't know how much they're using the features of the next generation firewalls with respect to blocking certain things. There was an adoption of what I call ICS deep packet inspection firewalls, or all the kind of devices today that do deep packet inspection to the level that they understand protocols like Modbus or DNP3 or things like that, that they can decompose and do something to actually block certain commands and things like that. And that was something, when I did the survey, was very hot. It was certainly growing. I still think it's growing pretty good. And then interest as well in unidirectional gateways and data diodes, which is one-way communication type devices. And that was something that was a little less. It's less than the DPI firewalls. But again, it was growing. A lot of people had interest in But then I asked people, okay, that's how it's being used. Now again, this is about a year old, year and a half old. But then I says, well, what more do you need? What tools do you need? You know, thinking people would come up with all these neat things that I would be the smart guy in the room when I read it. But pretty much they said, we don't need anything more. We have the technology we need. Our problem is in maintaining it. And that's probably why you've heard me talk so much about the maintenance issues around here, the cybersecurity management issues, is they say, we can't keep up with all that we have. Now, many of them have bought the stuff. Many of them don't even get benefits from it. So, in their interest in particular, there were some specific interests, things like if somebody could find a way to hot patch, that would be wonderful. That would really solve a big key issue. But I don't know anybody that's working on that. Maybe they are that I don't know about, but I don't see it. And what they were really interested in mostly were solutions that would help them maintain the products. Again, that's why I've been big on the cybersecurity management solutions.